The sound of plastic crinkling echoed through the sterile hospital corridor as 12-year-old Jamir Washington carefully unwrapped a granola bar. His dark eyes focused on the treat his grandmother had packed for him. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across his round face. Still puffy from the surgery he'd undergone 3 days earlier to remove his appendix. His hospital gown hung loose on his small frame. The faded blue fabric, decorated with tiny cartoon bears that seemed almost mocking in their cheerfulness. Karen Middleton stood frozen at the nurse's station, her manicured fingers gripping her designer purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her perfectly styled blonde hair framed a face twisted with disgust as she watched the boy take his first bite, crumbs falling onto his bedsheets. The disgust in her expression deepened as she pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the camera app. "This is absolutely disgusting," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for the nurse behind the desk to hear. "That child is clearly obese, and someone is allowing him to gorge himself right here in a medical facility. This is a public health crisis." Nurse Patricia Chen glanced up from her computer screen, her dark eyes immediately finding the source of the commotion. She'd been working in pediatrics for 15 years and had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. But something about this woman's tone sent warning bells through her mind. The way Karen's voice carried that particular edge of moral superiority, mixed with barely contained anger, made Patricia's stomach clench. "Ma'am, is there something I can help you with?" Patricia asked, her voice professionally neutral despite the growing concern in her chest. Karen's head snapped toward the nurse, her phone now recording as she gestured dramatically toward Jamir's room. "That child is eating himself to death while supposedly receiving medical care. Where are his parents? Why isn't anyone supervising what he's consuming? This is medical neglect at its finest." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Patricia felt her training kick in. She'd dealt with difficult family members before, but this felt different. This felt targeted. She glanced toward Jamir's room where the boy continued eating his snack, completely unaware of the storm brewing just outside his door. Jamir's grandmother, Esther Washington, sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside his bed, her weathered hands folded in her lap as she watched her grandson with the kind of love that only comes from raising a child through countless scraped knees and broken hearts. At 73, she'd raised 6 children of her own and was now helping her daughter raise Jamir while working 2 jobs to keep their small family afloat. "Slow down, baby," she said gently, reaching over to smooth his hair. "You don't want to make yourself sick." Jamir nodded, his cheeks still full of granola bar. "I'm just so hungry. Grandma, the hospital food tastes like cardboard." Esther chuckled softly, the sound warm and familiar in the sterile room. "I know, sweetheart. That's why I brought you some real food. But remember what the doctor said about eating slowly after your surgery." Outside in the corridor, Karen's voice had risen to a level that was beginning to attract attention from other visitors and staff members. She held her phone at arm's length, speaking directly into the camera with the practiced ease of someone who'd made complaining into an art form. "I'm here at Metropolitan General Hospital, and I'm witnessing what can only be described as child abuse," she announced to her phone screen. "A morbidly obese black child is being allowed to eat junk food while receiving medical treatment. This is exactly what's wrong with our healthcare system and our society." Patricia stepped out from behind the nurse's station, her professional demeanor intact despite the rage building in her chest. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording and lower your voice. This is a hospital, and you're disturbing other patients." Karen spun around, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "I have every right to document what I'm seeing. That child is clearly being abused through food, and someone needs to be held accountable." The child you're referring to is a post-operative patient who is eating a snack his grandmother brought him, Patricia explained, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger she felt. He's under the care of our medical team, and his dietary needs are being monitored. Monitored. Karen's voice cracked with disbelief. He's eating junk food. Look at him. Someone needs to call Child Protective Services immediately. The confrontation was beginning to draw a crowd. Other nurses had emerged from various rooms, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the attending physician, appeared at the end of the hallway, his surgical scrubs still damp from his last procedure. Inside room 314, Jamir had finished his granola bar and was now sipping from a juice box, his movements careful and deliberate as he tried to avoid aggravating his healing incision. The pain medication made him sleepy, but the hunger was constant, a side effect of the steroids he'd been given to reduce inflammation. "Grandma, why is that lady yelling?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. Esther's jaw tightened as she caught fragments of the conversation in the hallway. She'd lived through enough decades to recognize the tone, the barely concealed hatred that seemed to follow her family wherever they went. She stood up slowly, her arthritis making the movement painful, and walked to the door. "Don't you worry about her, baby," she said, though her voice carried a steely undertone. "Some people just don't have anything better to do with their time." In the hallway, Karen had escalated her performance, now speaking loudly enough that her voice carried throughout the entire pediatric wing. "I'm calling the police right now. This is criminal neglect, and I won't stand by and watch it happen." Dr. Rodriguez approached the scene with the measured steps of someone who'd dealt with countless family crises during his 15-year career. His dark eyes took in the situation quickly, noting the woman with the phone, the cluster of concerned staff members, and the growing tension that seemed to electrify the air around them. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-and-death situations. Karen whirled around, her phone still recording. "Are you the doctor responsible for that child's care? Because if you are, you need to explain why you're allowing child abuse to happen right under your nose." Dr. Rodriguez's expression remained neutral, but Patricia could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez, and I'm the attending physician for several patients on this floor. If you have concerns about a patient's care, I'd be happy to discuss them with you privately." Privately. Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. "This needs to be public. People need to see what's happening here." She turned back to her phone, her voice taking on the performative quality of someone who'd found their audience. "I'm now speaking with the doctor, and he's trying to silence me. This is exactly the kind of cover-up that allows child abuse to continue." The accusation hit Dr. Rodriguez like a physical blow. In his 15 years of practice, he'd never been accused of enabling child abuse, and the suggestion that he would cover up such a thing struck at the very core of his professional identity. His composure cracked slightly, and Patricia could see the flash of anger in his eyes. "Ma'am, I need you to stop recording immediately," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "You're violating patient privacy laws, and you're disrupting the care of children who need medical attention." Karen's response was to hold her phone higher, angling it to capture both the doctor and the hallway behind him. "I'm not violating anything. I'm exposing the truth. That child is being fed junk food while receiving medical care, and everyone here is complicit." At that moment, Esther Washington appeared in the doorway of room 314, her presence commanding attention despite her small stature. She wore a simple floral dress and orthopedic shoes, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. But there was something about the way she carried herself, the dignity in her posture, that made everyone in the hallway pause. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and strong despite her age. "I believe you're talking about my grandson." Karen's eyes lit up with what looked like vindication. Finally, someone who can explain why that child is being allowed to eat himself to death? Esther stepped fully into the hallway, her movements deliberate and controlled. "My grandson is recovering from appendectomy surgery. He's eating a granola bar that I brought him because he's hungry, and the hospital food upsets his stomach. I fail to see how that constitutes abuse." "Look at him," Karen gestured wildly toward the room. "He's clearly obese. Feeding him junk food is exactly what got him into this condition in the first place." The words hit Esther like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer to Karen, her voice dropping to a quiet intensity that was somehow more powerful than shouting. "My grandson is a 12-year-old boy who just had major surgery. He's scared, he's in pain, and he's hungry. The fact that you think it's appropriate to film him and call him names says more about you than it does about my family." Karen's face flushed red with indignation. "I'm trying to help him. Someone needs to intervene before it's too late." "Help him." Esther's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "You're standing in a hospital hallway, filming a sick child, and calling it help. That's not help. That's cruelty." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, his medical training taking over as he recognized the need to de-escalate the situation. "Mrs. Washington, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Ma'am." He turned to Karen. "I'm going to need you to stop recording and step away from the patient areas." Karen's response was to dial 911 on her phone, her movements deliberate and theatrical. "I'm calling the police. This is criminal neglect, and I won't let it continue." The sound of her voice requesting police assistance seemed to echo through the hallway, and Patricia felt her stomach drop. She'd seen situations like this before, knew how quickly they could spiral out of control once law enforcement became involved. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator's voice was tinny but clear through Karen's phone speaker. "I'm at Metropolitan General Hospital, and I'm witnessing child abuse," Karen announced, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who believed absolutely in their own righteousness. "A morbidly obese black child is being fed junk food by his grandmother while receiving medical care. The staff is refusing to intervene." The 911 operator's voice was professional but cautious. "Ma'am, are you saying you're witnessing immediate physical abuse of a child?" "Yes." Karen's voice cracked with emotion. "They're feeding him food that's clearly harmful to his health. This is medical neglect at its worst." Dr. Rodriguez had heard enough. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of his medical degree and 15 years of experience. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez, the attending physician. The child in question is my patient, and he's receiving appropriate care." Karen spun around, her phone still connected to the 911 operator. "The doctor is here now, and he's trying to cover this up. They're all in on it." The accusation of conspiracy hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Patricia could see the effect it was having on the other staff members. Nurses who had been watching from a distance were now clustering closer, their expressions ranging from concern to outright anger. Inside room 314, Jamir had finished his juice box and was now looking toward the door with growing anxiety. The raised voices in the hallway were impossible to ignore, and he could hear fragments of conversation that made his stomach twist with something that had nothing to do with his surgery. "Grandma, are they talking about me?" he asked, his voice small and frightened. Esther returned to his bedside, her face composed, despite the storm raging just outside their door. "Don't you worry about any of that, baby. Some people just don't have anything better to do with their time." But Jamir was smart enough to understand that the angry voices in the hallway were connected to him somehow, and the knowledge made him feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with his healing incision. In the hallway, the situation continued to escalate. Karen had ended her call with 911, but was now live streaming the confrontation on social media. Her phone held high as she provided commentary for her growing audience. "This is what happens when political correctness goes too far," she announced to her phone. "I'm being attacked for trying to protect a child. The medical staff here is more concerned with avoiding controversy than providing proper care." Dr. Rodriguez's patience had finally reached its breaking point. "Security," he called out, his voice carrying down the hallway. "I need security on the pediatric floor immediately." The request for security seemed to energize Karen rather than deter her. "Now they're calling security on me for trying to protect a child. This is exactly the kind of institutional racism that allows child abuse to continue unchecked." Patricia felt her training take over as she moved to intercept Karen's phone. "Ma'am, you're in violation of patient privacy laws. You need to stop recording immediately." Karen pulled her phone away, her movements quick and defensive. "I have every right to document what I'm seeing. This is a public place, and I'm a concerned citizen." "This is a hospital, not a public place," Patricia replied, her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. "You're filming patients without their consent, and you're disrupting their care." The arrival of hospital security marked a turning point in the confrontation. Officer James Thompson, a 20-year veteran of hospital security, approached the scene with the measured calm of someone who dealt with countless family disputes and medical emergencies. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Karen immediately turned her attention to him, her phone still recording. "Officer, I called 911 to report child abuse, and the hospital staff is trying to silence me. They're allowing a morbidly obese child to eat junk food while receiving medical care." Officer Thompson's expression remained neutral as he looked around the scene, taking in the cluster of medical staff, the agitated woman with the phone, and the growing crowd of onlookers. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording and step away from the patient areas." "I'm not doing anything wrong." Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. "I'm trying to protect a child, and everyone here is trying to silence me." At that moment, the elevator doors opened, and two police officers stepped onto the floor. Officers Maria Santos and David Kim had responded to the 911 call, their expressions serious as they took in the chaotic scene before them. "We received a call about possible child abuse," Officer Santos announced, her voice carrying the authority of law enforcement. "Who made the call?" Karen stepped forward immediately, her phone still recording. "I did. I'm witnessing child abuse, and the hospital staff is trying to cover it up." Officer Santos looked around the scene, her experienced eyes taking in the medical staff, the security officer, and the increasingly agitated woman with the phone. "Ma'am, I need you to stop recording and explain the situation." Karen's response was to hold her phone higher, angling it to capture both officers. "I'm documenting everything because they're trying to silence me. There's a morbidly obese black child in room 314, and his grandmother is feeding him junk food while he's receiving medical care." The racial identifier hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Officer Santos felt her stomach tighten with recognition. She'd been a police officer for 12 years, and she'd learned to recognize the subtle signs of racial bias in civilian complaints. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of his medical authority. Officers, I'm the attending physician. The child in question is my patient, and he's receiving appropriate post-operative care. Officer Kim nodded, his expression remaining neutral. We'll need to speak with the family and assess the situation. Ma'am. He turned to Karen. I need you to stop recording and step back while we investigate. Karen's response was immediate and dramatic. You're all in on it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Nobody wants to do their job. The accusation of conspiracy involving multiple law enforcement officers was a step too far, and Officer Santos felt her professional patience begin to wear thin. Ma'am, you need to calm down and allow us to do our job. Inside room 314, Jamir had become increasingly agitated as the voices in the hallway grew louder and more hostile. He could hear fragments of conversation that made his stomach twist with anxiety, and he kept looking toward the door with growing fear. Grandma, why are the police here? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Esther sat back down beside his bed, her movements careful and controlled despite the storm raging just outside their door. I don't know, baby, but whatever's happening, it's not your fault. Officer Santos appeared in the doorway, her presence immediately commanding attention. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that seemed to fill the room with calm authority. Hello, she said, her voice gentle but official. I'm Officer Santos. We received a call about concerns regarding this patient's care. Are you the grandmother? Esther stood up slowly, her dignity intact despite the circumstances. Yes, I am. Esther Washington. This is my grandson, Jamir. Officer Santos looked at Jamir, taking in his small form in the hospital bed, the surgical gown, the IV line in his arm, and the obvious signs of recent medical care. Hello, Jamir. How are you feeling? Jamir looked between his grandmother and the police officer, his confusion evident. I'm okay. I guess. I had surgery to take out my appendix. I see, Officer Santos said, her voice remaining gentle. And you were eating something earlier. Jamir nodded, his eyes wide with concern. Grandma brought me a granola bar because I was hungry. The hospital food makes me feel sick. Officer Santos turned to Esther, her expression neutral but professional. Ma'am, can you tell me about your grandson's medical condition and the care he's receiving? Esther's voice was steady despite the circumstances. Jamir had emergency appendectomy surgery 3 days ago. He's been recovering well, but the hospital food upsets his stomach. I brought him some snacks that I know he can tolerate. Has his doctor approved these snacks? Officer Santos asked. Before Esther could answer, Dr. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Officer, I can answer that. I'm Dr. Rodriguez, Jamir's attending physician. The snacks his grandmother brought are perfectly appropriate for his current dietary needs. Officer Santos nodded, her expression showing the first signs of understanding. Doctor, can you explain the medical situation to me? Dr. Rodriguez stepped into the room, his presence immediately reassuring. Jamir underwent emergency appendectomy surgery 3 days ago. He's recovering well, but like many post-operative patients, he's experiencing some nausea from the hospital food. The snacks his grandmother brought are actually helping him maintain his nutrition during recovery. So there's no medical concern about his diet? Officer Santos asked. None whatsoever. Dr. Rodriguez replied firmly. He's eating appropriate foods in appropriate quantities. His grandmother is actually being very responsible by ensuring he's getting nutrition he can tolerate. Officer Santos looked around the room, taking in the medical equipment, the chart at the foot of the bed, and the obvious signs of legitimate medical care. Is there anything about this situation that would constitute abuse or neglect? Dr. Rodriguez's expression hardened slightly. Absolutely not. What I'm seeing is a loving grandmother caring for her grandson during his recovery from surgery. The suggestion that this constitutes abuse is not only wrong, it's offensive. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Karen had become increasingly agitated as the police officers took their time investigating rather than immediately arresting someone. She continued to live stream, her commentary becoming more erratic and hostile. "They're in there covering it up right now," she announced to her phone. "I've been here for over an hour, and nobody wants to do their job. This is exactly what's wrong with our system." Officer Kim had been listening to Karen's commentary with growing concern. Her accusations were becoming more wild and unfounded, and her insistence on filming everything was starting to create a hostile environment for the other patients and families on the floor. "Ma'am, I need you to stop recording and step away from the patient areas," he said firmly. Karen's response was to hold her phone higher, angling it to capture his face. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm a concerned citizen trying to protect a child." At that moment, Dr. Rodriguez and Officer Santos emerged from room 314, their expressions serious but calm. The contrast between their professional demeanor and Karen's increasingly erratic behavior was striking. "Officer Kim!" Officer Santos called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had reached a conclusion. "I've completed my assessment of the situation." Karen immediately turned her attention to the female officer, her phone still recording. Finally, someone who's going to do their job. Officer Santos looked directly at Karen, her expression professional but firm. "Ma'am, after investigating your complaint, I've determined that there is no evidence of child abuse or neglect. The child is receiving appropriate medical care, and his dietary needs are being properly managed." Karen's face went white with shock. "That's impossible. You didn't investigate anything. You're all covering it up." "Ma'am," Officer Santos continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "I need you to stop recording immediately and leave the hospital premises. You're disrupting patient care and violating privacy laws." Karen's response was immediate and explosive. "I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here until someone does their job. This is a cover-up, and I'm going to expose it." Officer Kim stepped forward, his patience finally exhausted. "Ma'am, you're being asked to leave by hospital staff and law enforcement. If you refuse to comply, you'll be arrested for trespassing." Karen's eyes blazed with righteous indignation. "Arrest me, then I'm not going anywhere until justice is served." The threat of arrest seemed to energize rather than deter her, and she began speaking more rapidly into her phone. "They're threatening to arrest me for trying to protect a child. This is exactly the kind of institutional racism that allows child abuse to continue." At that moment, the elevator doors opened again, and a woman in a professional suit stepped onto the floor. Dr. Michelle Washington, head of pediatric nutrition at the hospital, had received word of the disturbance and had come to investigate personally. She was a tall, elegant woman with natural hair pulled back in a professional style, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent years fighting for her place in the medical hierarchy. Her presence immediately commanded attention, and several people in the hallway turned to look at her. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Dr. Michelle Washington, head of pediatric nutrition. I understand there's been a complaint about a patient's dietary care." Karen's eyes lit up with what looked like vindication. Finally, someone who understands nutrition. That child is being fed junk food, and nobody wants to do anything about it. Dr. Washington looked around the scene, taking in the police officers, the agitated woman with the phone, and the cluster of medical staff. "Which patient are we discussing?" Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression showing the first signs of relief. "Dr. Washington, we're discussing Jamir Washington in room 314. He's post-operative day 3 from appendectomy." Dr. Washington's expression remained neutral, but Patricia noticed the slight tightening around her eyes at the mention of the name. "I see. And what are the specific dietary concerns?" Karen immediately launched into her complaint, her voice rising with renewed energy. "He's eating granola bars and drinking juice boxes. He's clearly obese, and nobody is monitoring his food intake." Dr. Washington nodded thoughtfully, her expression remaining professional. "I see. And you are?" "I'm Karen Middleton, a concerned citizen who refuses to stand by and watch child abuse," Karen announced, her phone still recording. Dr. Washington looked directly at the camera, her expression calm but authoritative. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording. Patient privacy laws prohibit filming in medical facilities without consent." Karen's response was to hold her phone higher. "I'm documenting everything because everyone here is trying to cover up child abuse." Dr. Washington's expression hardened slightly. "Ma'am, there is no child abuse occurring here. However, there is a violation of patient privacy laws happening right now." She turned to the police officers, her voice carrying the weight of medical authority. "Officers, I need this woman to stop recording and leave the premises immediately. She's in violation of federal privacy laws." Karen's face flushed with anger. "You're all in on it. Nobody wants to do their job." At that moment, Dr. Washington made a decision that would change the entire trajectory of the confrontation. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying a new intensity, "I think there's something you should know about the patient you're so concerned about." She looked directly at Karen, her expression serious. "Jamir Washington is my cousin." The revelation hit the hallway like a physical blow. Karen's mouth fell open in shock, and the phone in her hand trembled slightly. The police officers exchanged glances, and Dr. Rodriguez looked like he was trying not to smile. Dr. Washington continued, her voice steady and professional. "I've been monitoring his nutritional needs personally since his surgery. The snacks his grandmother brought are not only appropriate, they're actually helping his recovery." Karen's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to confusion to growing anger. "That's impossible. You're just saying that to protect him." "Actually," Dr. Washington replied, pulling out her phone, "I can show you his dietary plan right now. I designed it myself." She turned to Officer Santos, her voice taking on a more personal tone. "Officer, I'd like to file a complaint against this woman for harassment of my family member and violation of patient privacy laws." Karen's eyes went wide with panic. "You can't do that. I'm the victim here. I'm trying to protect a child." Dr. Washington's expression remained calm, but there was steel in her voice. "Ma'am, You've spent the last hour filming my 12-year-old cousin without consent, calling him names, and accusing his grandmother of abuse. That's not protection. That's harassment. Officer Santos stepped forward, her expression showing the first signs of real authority. Ma'am, you're under arrest for harassment and violation of privacy laws. Karen's response was immediate and dramatic. This is illegal. You can't arrest me for trying to protect a child. But Officer Santos was already moving, her handcuffs ready. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the Miranda rights were read, Karen's livestream continued to run, capturing her arrest for her online audience. The irony was not lost on anyone present that her determination to document everything was now documenting her own downfall. Dr. Washington watched the arrest with satisfaction, but her primary concern was for her cousin. She walked toward room 314, where Jamir and his grandmother were waiting with growing anxiety. Aunt Michelle. Jamir's voice was small and confused as she entered the room. Dr. Washington's professional demeanor melted away as she saw her young cousin looking small and frightened in the hospital bed. Hey, baby, how are you feeling? I'm okay, I guess, Jamir replied, his eyes wide with concern. Why were those people yelling about me? Dr. Washington sat down beside his bed, her voice gentle and reassuring. Some people don't understand that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, especially when they're sick. But you don't need to worry about that anymore. Esther looked at her niece with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. Michelle, thank you for coming. I didn't know how to handle that situation. You handled it perfectly, Aunt Esther. Dr. Washington replied firmly. You protected Jamir and stood up for your family. That's exactly what you should have done. As the commotion in the hallway finally died down, the news crews began to arrive. Word of the incident had spread through social media, and Karen's livestream had attracted thousands of viewers. The story was already being picked up by local news outlets, and reporters were gathering outside the hospital. Dr. Washington recognized the opportunity presented by the media attention. As head of pediatric nutrition, she had long been an advocate for children's health and dignity, and this incident provided a platform to address larger issues of bias and discrimination in healthcare. She arranged for a press conference in the hospital's main lobby, where she would be joined by Dr. Rodriguez, Patricia, and other staff members who had witnessed the incident. The goal was to turn this negative situation into a positive force for change. The press conference was held 2 hours later, with Dr. Washington serving as the primary spokesperson. She spoke eloquently about the importance of treating all patients with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or background. Today's incident highlights a serious problem in our healthcare system, she announced to the gathered reporters. Too often, patients are judged based on their appearance rather than their medical needs. This must stop. She went on to explain the medical facts of Jamir's case, emphasizing that his dietary needs were being properly managed and that his grandmother's care was exemplary. She also addressed the broader issues of bias and discrimination that the incident had revealed. The press conference was broadcast live on local television and streamed online, reaching thousands of viewers. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with messages of support pouring in from around the country. Over the following days, the story continued to gain traction. Karen's arrest video went viral, and her live stream became a cautionary tale about the dangers of vigilante justice and racial profiling. She was ultimately charged with harassment, violation of privacy laws, and disturbing the peace. Meanwhile, Jamir's story became a symbol of resilience and family strength. His recovery progressed smoothly, and he was discharged from the hospital 5 days later. But the impact of the incident continued to ripple outward. Dr. Washington used the media attention to launch a campaign against food shaming and medical bias. She worked with hospital administrators to implement new training programs for staff, focusing on cultural sensitivity and patient dignity. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about the role of social media in perpetuating discrimination. Karen's livestream had been intended to shame a child and his family, but it had instead exposed the ugly reality of racial bias in everyday interactions. 3 months later, Jamir was fully recovered and back to his normal activities. He had become something of a local celebrity, with his story inspiring anti-bullying campaigns in schools throughout the city. His grandmother Esther was invited to speak at community events about the importance of standing up to discrimination. Dr. Washington continued her advocacy work, using her platform to address issues of healthcare equity and patient dignity. She had turned a moment of crisis into an opportunity for positive change, demonstrating the power of professional expertise combined with family love. The hospital implemented new policies regarding patient privacy and visitor conduct, ensuring that future incidents would be handled more quickly and effectively. Staff members received additional training on recognizing and responding to bias and discrimination. As for Karen, she faced serious legal consequences for her actions. She was ultimately convicted of harassment and violation of privacy laws, receiving a substantial fine and community service. She was also permanently banned from the hospital premises. The incident served as a powerful reminder that healthcare is a fundamental human right, and that all patients deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. It also demonstrated the importance of family advocacy and professional expertise in protecting vulnerable individuals from discrimination and abuse. In the end, what had started as an attempt to shame a child and his family had become a catalyst for positive change, proving that even in the face of hatred and prejudice, love and justice can prevail.